The name tag read Housekeeper in bold black letters. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds, wondering if this was some kind of joke. But looking at my mother-in-law's satisfied smirk as she handed it to me at the front door of her mansion, I knew it wasn't. "Put it on, Nick," Margaret Harrington said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We want everyone to know who's who at Emily's engagement party." My wife Julia stood right beside her mother, saying nothing. Not a word of protest, not even a nervous laugh to pretend this was all in good fun. She just looked at her manicured nails like they were the most fascinating things in the world. "You're kidding, right?" I said, holding the name tag between two fingers like it was contaminated. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "You're always complaining about how you clean up after everyone anyway. Now it's official." The other guests were already streaming past us into the sprawling living room. I recognized most of them: Julia's extended family, her college friends, people from her HR job at the insurance company. They were all dressed in their Sunday best, chatting and laughing, holding wine glasses and looking like they belonged in a magazine spread. And here I was, Nick Foster, 39 years old, wearing my only decent suit that I'd bought 3 years ago for my father's funeral, being handed a name tag that labeled me as the help. "Just put it on," Julia finally spoke, not meeting my eyes. "Ah, it's just for tonight." Just for tonight? Like that made it better. I looked around at the marble foyer, the crystal chandelier, the oil paintings that probably cost more than my truck. This wasn't my world. It never had been. But I was married to Julia, which meant I had to endure these family gatherings where I was treated like something they'd scraped off their designer shoes. "Fine," I said, slapping the name tag onto my jacket. "Where do you want me to start? The dishes? Maybe I should mop the floors while everyone's dancing." Margaret's laugh was like broken glass. "Oh, Nick, always so dramatic." The party was already in full swing. Emily, Julia's younger sister and the obvious favorite child, was holding court in the center of the room. She was showing off her engagement ring, a rock the size of a golf ball, to a circle of admiring women. Her fiancé Carter stood beside her, looking like he'd stepped out of a country club catalog. I grabbed a beer from the kitchen and found a corner to observe from. That's when the real fun began. "Nick!" called out my old friend Mike from across the room. He was walking over with his wife Sarah, both of them smiling until they got close enough to read my name tag. Mike's smile faltered. What's with the question mark?" "Family joke," I said, taking a long drink of beer. Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Oh, right. Well, we should go say hi to the happy couple." They practically ran away from me. And that's when I realized this wasn't just Margaret's sick idea of humor. This was strategic. This was designed to isolate me, to make me look like exactly what the name tag said I was. The hired caterers were setting up the buffet table, and I watched as guests began lining up for food. Prime rib, lobster tails, some kind of fancy pasta that probably had a name I couldn't pronounce. I got in line behind Carter's business partner, a guy named Robert, who'd always been polite to me at previous family functions. "Excuse me," came Margaret's voice from behind me. "The buffet is for family and invited guests only." I turned around. She was looking directly at me. "I am family," I said. "I'm married to your daughter." "The staff eats in the kitchen," she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "There are sandwiches on the counter." The line went quiet. Robert stepped away from me like I had some kind of disease. Other guests were staring now, whispering to each other behind their hands. Julia was across the room, deep in conversation with her boss, Greg Palmer. She had to have heard what just happened, but she didn't even look in my direction. "You know what?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think I'll pass on the sandwiches. I'm not really hungry anyway." I walked back to my corner, my face burning with humiliation. The party continued around me like nothing had happened, but I could feel the stares, hear the whispered conversations. Poor Julia. I don't know what she sees in him. He seems angry. Well, you know how working class men get when they are out of their element? Working class, like it was a disease. I finished my beer and went to get another one. In the kitchen, I found the caterers eating their own meals, actual meals, not sandwiches. They looked at me sympathetically. "Rough crowd," one of them said. "You have no idea." I was standing there, drinking my second beer and wondering how much longer I had to endure this, when I heard Julia's laugh from the living room. Not just any laugh, her flirty laugh. The one she used to use with me, back when we were dating. I walked to the doorway and saw her standing very close to Greg Palmer, her hand on his arm, looking up at him with those big blue eyes that had first attracted me 15 years ago. Greg was saying something that was apparently hilarious, because Julia was practically doubled over with laughter. He was a good-looking guy, I had to admit. Tall, athletic, expensive suit, full head of hair, everything I wasn't. They make a good-looking couple, don't they? I turned to find Margaret standing beside me, following my gaze. That's my wife you're talking about, I said. Is she, though? Margaret's smile was pure poison. When's the last time she acted like it? Before I could respond, she walked away, leaving me standing there with that question echoing in my head. The party dragged on for another hour. I watched my wife flirt with her boss. I watched our mutual friends avoid me like I was radioactive. I watched Margaret hold court with the other society ladies, probably telling them all about her daughter's unfortunate choice in husbands. Finally, Emily called for everyone's attention. She was standing on the marble staircase, Carter beside her, looking like a princess in her designer dress. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she said, her voice carrying perfectly through the room. Having family and friends here to celebrate our engagement means everything to us. Everyone applauded. I stayed in my corner, clapping slowly. I especially want to thank my mother for hosting this beautiful party, Emily continued, and my sister Julia for helping with all the planning. And of course, our wonderful staff for taking such good care of everyone tonight. She gestured toward the caterers who were cleaning up in the background, and then she gestured toward me. Let's give them all a round of applause. The room erupted in clapping and cheering. Everyone was looking at me, smiling and applauding like I was part of the hired help who'd done a good job serving them dinner. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I reached up and slowly peeled the name tag off my jacket. The room gradually went quiet as people realized what I was doing. You know what? I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. I think there's been a mistake. I held up the name tag for everyone to see. This says Housekeeper, but I'm actually Nick Foster, Julia's husband. You know, the guy who's been married to your daughter for 8 years, Margaret. Margaret's face went pale. Julia was staring at me with wide eyes, shaking her head slightly. I'm the guy who renovated your bathroom last summer for free. I'm the guy who fixed Carter's car when it broke down on the highway. I'm the guy who's been coming to these family gatherings for almost a decade, trying to be part of this family. I walked toward the center of the room. People stepped aside to let me pass. But I get it now. I'm not family. I'm the help. I'm the guy who's good enough to fix your problems and clean up your messes, but not good enough to eat at the same table. I stopped in front of Julia. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Is that what I am to you? I asked her. The help? Nick, please, she whispered. Don't do this here. Where else should I do it? In private, where you can pretend it never happened? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. The room was dead silent now. You want to know what the real joke is? I said, holding up the ring. I actually thought we were partners. I thought we were building something together. But I was just the maintenance guy, wasn't I? I set the ring down on the nearest table. Well, congratulations, everyone. You don't have to pretend to tolerate the help anymore. I walked toward the front door. Behind me, I could hear Julia calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Nick, wait. I paused at the door and looked back at the room full of shocked faces. Thanks for the party, I said. It was very educational. And then I walked out into the night, leaving my old life behind. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept expecting Julia to call, to text, to show up behind me with her headlights in my rearview mirror. But my phone stayed silent, and the road behind me stayed dark. Our house looked different when I pulled into the driveway, smaller, shabbier, like I was seeing it through Margaret's eyes for the first time. The paint was peeling on the shutters, the lawn needed work. The whole place screamed working class in a way that had never bothered me before. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, engine ticking as it cooled down, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do now. I'd just blown up my marriage in front of 30 people. There was no taking that back. My phone finally buzzed around midnight. A text from Julia. We need to talk. No apology. No explanation. Just, we need to talk, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I didn't respond. She came home at 2 a.m. I heard her car in the driveway, heard her fumbling with her keys at the front door. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wide awake. She came into the bedroom and turned on the lamp. I didn't move. That was really embarrassing, Nick. I sat up and looked at her. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was messy, and she smelled like wine and expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Embarrassing for who? For everyone. My family, our friends. You made a scene. I made a scene? I got out of bed and faced her. Your mother labeled me as the hired help and wouldn't let me eat with the guests. Your sister thanked me along with the caterers. And I made a scene? Julia kicked off her heels and started undressing like this was just another normal night. You know how my mother is? You should have just ignored it. Like you did? She paused, her dress halfway over her head. What's that supposed to mean? It means you stood there and watched your mother humiliate me and you didn't say a word. You didn't defend me. You didn't even acknowledge that it was wrong. She pulled the dress off and hung it in the closet. I didn't want to cause a bigger scene. Right, because the important thing was protecting your family's reputation, not your husband's dignity. Don't be so dramatic. Dramatic. There was that word again. Where were you tonight? After I left? Cleaning up the mess you made. Apologizing to people. Trying to explain why my husband had a meltdown at my sister's engagement party. And I'm sure Greg Palmer was very supportive during this difficult time. She went very still. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just an observation. She turned to face me, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked actually concerned. You're being paranoid. Am I? We stared at each other for a long moment. Then she shook her head and walked into the bathroom. I'm tired, Nick. Can we discuss this tomorrow? Sure, I said. We'll discuss it tomorrow. But I knew we wouldn't. Julia was a master at avoiding difficult conversations. By tomorrow, she'd act like nothing had happened, and I'd be expected to go along with it. I went downstairs and made coffee, even though it was almost 3 a.m. I needed to think. The truth was, tonight hadn't been a surprise. It had been building for years. The little comments, the casual dismissals, the way Julia's family treated me like I was some kind of charity case she'd taken on. And Julia had let it happen every single time. I thought about Greg Palmer. He was everything I wasn't. College-educated, well-connected, financially successful. He drove a BMW and wore suits that cost more than I made in a month. And tonight, Julia had been hanging on his every word. When's the last time she acted like my wife? Margaret's question kept echoing in my head. When was the last time? When was the last time Julia had looked at me the way she'd looked at Greg tonight? When was the last time she'd laughed at something I said? When was the last time she'd defended me, supported me, acted like we were on the same team? I couldn't remember. I spent the rest of the night going through our finances, our schedules, our life together. Looking for clues I might have missed. Julia traveled a lot for work, or so she said. HR conferences, training seminars, client meetings. She was gone at least one weekend a month, sometimes more. Her phone was always face down when she was home. She'd started taking it with her to the bathroom. She'd changed her passwords on everything. She'd been working late more often. Big project, she'd say. You know how it is. But I didn't know how it was. I worked construction and renovation. When the job was done, it was done. You didn't need to stay late to finish hanging drywall or installing tile. By the time the sun came up, I had a pretty clear picture of what my marriage had become. And it wasn't pretty. Julia came downstairs around 8, dressed for work, moving around the kitchen like nothing had happened. I made coffee, I said. Thanks. She poured herself a cup and started checking her phone. So, we're not going to talk about last night? What's to talk about? You were upset, you overreacted, and now we move on. I overreacted. Yes. She looked at me like I was being particularly slow. My mother was just teasing you. You know how she is. And the name tag? And not being allowed to eat with everyone else? She was just trying to be funny. And you laughing along with her boss all night? Julia's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Excuse me? Greg Palmer. You two seemed very close. He's my boss, Nick. I have to maintain a professional relationship with him. Is that what you call it? She slammed her coffee cup down on the counter. I don't like what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question. The answer is no. No, I'm not having an affair. No, I'm not interested in Greg Palmer. And no, I don't appreciate you questioning my integrity. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm going to work. When I get home tonight, I'd like to have a normal conversation with my husband instead of being interrogated like a criminal. The door slammed behind her. I sat there for a long time, staring at my coffee and thinking about the way she'd answered my question. Very specific, very defensive, and not entirely convincing. My phone rang around 10. Doug Morrison, my old army buddy who now worked as a private investigator. Heard you caused quite a stir last night, he said. News travels fast. Sarah called my wife this morning. Said you had some kind of breakdown at a fancy party. That's one way to put it. Want to grab lunch? You sound like you could use someone to talk to. Yeah, I said. I think I could. Doug and I met at Murphy's, a dive bar that served decent burgers and minded its own business. He was already waiting in a back booth when I arrived, nursing a beer and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. You look like hell, he said as I sat down. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Doug had been my sergeant in Afghanistan, back when we were both young and stupid enough to think we could fix the world. Now he was 42, divorced, and made his living following cheating spouses around with a camera. Life had a way of humbling everyone eventually. "So," he said, "want to tell me what really happened last night?" I told him everything. The name tag, the buffet incident, Julia's behavior with her boss, the whole humiliating spectacle. Doug listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. "Jesus," he said when I finished. "That's cold, even for rich people." The worst part is, Julia acts like I'm the one who did something wrong. "Maybe you did." I looked at him sharply. "Excuse me?" "Maybe you should have done it years ago. How long have you been letting them treat you like garbage?" "It wasn't always this bad." "Wasn't it?" Doug leaned forward. "Nick, I've known you for 20 years. You're a good man, but you're a pushover, especially when it comes to Julia." "That's not true." "When's the last time you stood up to her about anything? When's the last time you told her no?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right, and we both knew it. "She's cheating on you," Doug said quietly. "You don't know that." "I know the signs." "Hell, I make a living off the signs. The late nights, the business trips, the phone behavior, the way she's pulling away from you emotionally. It's textbook." She denied it. "Of course she did. They always deny it." The waitress brought our burgers. I stared at mine, suddenly not hungry. "What do you want me to say, Doug? That my marriage is over? That my wife is screwing her boss? That I'm a pathetic loser who's been living in denial for years?" "I want you to say you're ready to find out the truth." "And then what?" "Even if you're right, then what? I confront her. She leaves me for him. I end up alone in that house, wondering where it all went wrong." "Or," Doug said, "you find out what's really going on, and you take control of your life for the first time in years." We ate in silence for a while. Finally, Doug pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "Think about it. If you want to know for sure, call me. I'll give you the friend discount." I stared at the card. Douglas Morrison, private investigator. Discreet, professional, results. "I don't know if I want to know." "You already know," Doug said. "You just want proof." That afternoon, I went back to work. I was renovating a kitchen in one of the newer subdivisions, the kind of place where Julia and I might have lived if I'd made different choices, if I'd gone to college instead of the army, if I'd been born into the right family. The homeowner, Mrs. Chen, was a nice lady who always offered me coffee and treated me with respect. She was probably 10 years older than Margaret Harrington, but she'd never once made me feel like I was beneath her. "You seem distracted today," she said, bringing me a sandwich around noon. "Just tired." "Everything okay at home?" I almost laughed. Everything okay at home. If only it were that simple. "My wife and I are going through a rough patch." "Mrs. Chen nodded sympathetically. "Marriage is hard work, but if you both want to fix it, you can." "What if only one person wants to fix it?" She was quiet for a moment. "Then it's not really a marriage anymore, is it?" That evening, Julia came home late again. Big project at work. She heated up leftover Chinese food and ate while scrolling through her phone. "How was your day?" I asked. "Busy. Yours?" "Fine." We were like strangers sharing a house. Polite, distant, careful not to get too close. "I'm going to bed early," she said around 9. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." "On Saturday?" She paused. "It's an important client. Greg thinks it could lead to a big contract." "Greg thinks." "Yes, Greg thinks. He's my boss, Nick. His opinion matters." She went upstairs. I heard the shower running, heard her moving around the bedroom. Then everything went quiet. I waited an hour, then crept upstairs. She was asleep, or pretending to be. Her phone was on the nightstand, face down as always. I stood there in the darkness, looking at my wife of 8 years, and realized I felt nothing. No love, no anger, no sadness, just emptiness. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Client meeting all day. Don't wait up. J." I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at Doug's business card. My phone rang. It was Mike, my old friend from the party. "Hey, Nick. Listen, about last night. Don't worry about it. No, I should have said something. The way Julia's family treated you was wrong. Thanks. Sarah and I were talking, and we think maybe we should all get together sometime, like old times. Maybe." There was a long pause. "You doing okay, man?" "I'm fine." "Because if you need anything..." I'm fine, Mike. Really. But I wasn't fine. I was anything but fine. After he hung up, I called Doug. I want to hire you, I said. You sure about this? No, but I need to know. Okay, I'll need some information. Her schedule, her usual routines, places she goes, and I'll need a recent photo. How long will it take? Depends. If she's being careless, maybe a week. If she's being careful, could be longer. And if you don't find anything? Then you'll know she's telling the truth and you can work on fixing your marriage. And if you do find something? Doug was quiet for a moment, and then you'll have some decisions to make. Doug called me 3 days later. We need to meet, he said, and you're not going to like what I have to show you. We met at the same booth at Murphy's. This time, Doug had a manila envelope with him. You sure you want to see this? He asked. My hands were shaking. Just show me. He opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs. The first one showed Julia's car parked outside a hotel downtown. The second showed Julia and Greg Palmer walking into the hotel together, his hand on the small of her back. The Marriott downtown, Doug said. They've been meeting there every Tuesday afternoon for the past month, maybe longer. I flipped through the photos, Julia and Greg in the hotel bar, Julia and Greg getting into the elevator, Julia and Greg coming out of the elevator 2 hours later, her hair messed up, his tie loosened. There's more, Doug said quietly. He pulled out another set of photos. These were taken with a telephoto lens through what looked like a hotel room window. Julia and Greg kissing, Julia and Greg undressing each other, Julia and Greg in bed together. I felt sick. I'm sorry, Nick. I really am. I stared at the photos, trying to process what I was seeing. My wife of 8 years, the woman I'd built a life with, making love to another man, looking happier and more passionate than she'd looked with me in years. How long? I asked. Based on what I could find out, at least 6 months, maybe longer. 6 months? The hotel staff knows them. They have a regular room. They pay in cash. I thought about all the Tuesday evenings when Julia had come home late, claiming she'd been stuck in meetings, all the times she'd been too tired for intimacy, too stressed, too busy. There's something else, Doug said. He pulled out a small digital recorder. I managed to get close enough to record part of their conversation yesterday. He pressed play. Julia's voice, clear as day. I can't keep doing this. He's getting suspicious. Greg's voice. He's not that smart. He hasn't figured it out yet. Julia, laughing. You'd be surprised. He asked me directly if we were having an affair. Greg. What did you tell him? Julia. I told him no, of course. But he's not as stupid as my mother thinks he is. Greg. Your mother thinks he's stupid? Julia. She thinks he's beneath me. She's been telling me for years that I married down. Greg. Maybe you did? Julia. Maybe I did. Doug turned off the recorder. I sat there staring at the photos, listening to my wife's words echo in my head. I need a drink, I said. Doug ordered us both whiskey. I downed mine in one gulp and ordered another. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know. You could confront them. You could file for divorce. You could pretend you never saw this and try to work it out. Work it out? She's been screwing her boss for 6 months and laughing about how stupid I am. Yeah, that option's probably off the table. I looked at the photos again. In one of them, Julia was smiling at Greg, the way she used to smile at me when we were first dating, like he was the most wonderful thing in the world. She's in love with him, I said. Looks that way. So why is she still with me? Doug shrugged. Maybe he won't leave his wife. Maybe she's waiting for the right time. Maybe she likes having the security of a marriage while getting the excitement of an affair. Or maybe she just hasn't figured out how to dump me without looking like the bad guy. That's possible, too. I finished my second whiskey and stood up. I need to think. Nick, don't do anything stupid. Like what? Like confronting them when you're drunk and angry. Like showing up at their hotel. Like doing something that could get you arrested. I'm not going to do anything stupid. But as I drove home, I wasn't sure that was true. I was angrier than I'd ever been in my life. Not just at Julia, but at myself. For being so blind, so trusting, so pathetically naive. The house felt different when I walked in. It felt like a lie. Everything in it was a lie. The wedding photos on the mantel, the furniture we'd picked out together, the bed where we'd slept side by side while she was thinking about another man. I went to Julia's dresser and started going through her things. In the back of her jewelry box, I found a key I didn't recognize. In her coat pocket, I found receipts from restaurants I'd never been to. dated on days when she'd told me she was working late. In her purse, I found a second phone. It was a cheap prepaid phone, the kind people used when they didn't want to be tracked. I turned it on and scrolled through the messages. All from Greg. Can't wait to see you Tuesday. Last night was incredible. I think about you all day. Your husband called the office looking for you. I told him you were in a meeting. When are you going to tell him? I love you. I sat on the bed, holding the phone, reading message after message. Plans for their meetings, expressions of love, discussions about me that made it clear they both thought I was a joke. And then I found the message that changed everything. It was from last week, the day before Emily's engagement party. Greg, your mother called me today. Julia, what? Why? Greg, she wanted to make sure I'd be at the party tomorrow. She has some kind of plan. Julia, what kind of plan? Greg, something about making your husband look bad. She thinks if he's humiliated enough, he'll leave on his own. Julia, that's horrible. Greg, is it? Wouldn't that solve our problem? Julia, I guess. Greg, your mother really hates him. Julia, she thinks he's holding me back. Greg, maybe he is. Julia, maybe. I read the messages 3 times, making sure I understood what I was seeing. Margaret hadn't just been cruel to me at the party. She'd been strategic. She'd deliberately humiliated me, hoping I'd leave Julia, clearing the way for Greg. And Julia had known about it. She'd stood there and watched her mother destroy me. Knowing it was all part of a plan to get me out of the picture, I heard Julia's car in the driveway. It was almost midnight, another late night at the office. I put the phone back in her purse and went downstairs. When she came in, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a beer, looking like I'd been there all evening. How was your day? She asked, same as always. Fine. Yours? Long, but productive. She kissed the top of my head, a quick, perfunctory gesture that made my skin crawl. I'm exhausted, she said. I'm going straight to bed. Julia? She paused at the bottom of the stairs. Yeah? Do you love me? She looked surprised by the question. Of course I do. Why would you ask that? Just wondering. She studied my face for a moment, then smiled. You're being silly. Of course I love you. It was the most convincing lie she'd ever told me. After she went upstairs, I sat in the kitchen until dawn, planning my revenge. I spent the next week preparing. Not confronting Julia, not filing for divorce, not doing any of the things a normal person might do. Instead, I planned. Julia thought I was stupid. Her mother thought I was beneath them. Greg thought I was a joke. They were about to find out how wrong they were. First, I made copies of everything. The photos, the recordings, the text messages from the burner phone. I stored them in multiple locations. My truck, my toolbox at work, a safety deposit box at the bank. Then I started gathering intelligence. Greg Palmer was married to a woman named Linda. They lived in a big house in the suburbs and had 2 teenage kids. I found Linda on social media. She posted constantly about their perfect family life, their vacations, their anniversary dinners. She had no idea her husband was cheating on her. Margaret Harrington was the president of the local historical society and served on the boards of 3 different charities. Her reputation in the community was everything to her. She had no idea her daughter was having an affair with a married man. Emily's wedding was in 2 weeks. The whole family would be there, along with all their friends and business associates. Perfect. I called Doug and asked him to keep monitoring Julia and Greg's activities. I needed to know their schedule, their routines, their plans. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking it's time for some truth-telling. Nick, be careful. Revenge fantasies are one thing, but actually following through. I'm not fantasizing, Doug. I'm planning. What about just divorcing her? Taking half of everything and moving on with your life? Half of what? We don't have anything worth taking. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. We've got maybe $5,000 in savings, and her 401k isn't worth much. So what's the point of revenge? The point is that they think they can treat me like garbage and get away with it. The point is that they think I'm too stupid and too weak to fight back. And you want to prove them wrong. I want to destroy them. Doug was quiet for a long moment. Okay, but we do this smart. No violence, no property damage, nothing that can come back on you legally. Agreed. And when it's over, you walk away clean. No looking back, no second thoughts, no regrets. Deal. That Tuesday, while Julia was at her regular hotel meeting with Greg, I went to their office. I knew the building. I'd done some renovation work there 2 years earlier. I knew the layout, the security, the staff. I also knew that Greg's secretary left at 5 sharp every day, and that the cleaning crew didn't come until after 7. I waited in the parking lot until I saw Greg's BMW leave. Then I went inside. The security guard knew me from my previous work there. "Hey, Nick, working late tonight?" "Just need to check on something in the conference room." "Won't be long." He waved me through. Greg's office was on the 3rd floor. The door was locked, but I'd learned a few things about locks during my Army days. It took me less than 2 minutes to get inside. His computer was password protected, but his filing cabinet wasn't. I found what I was looking for in a folder marked Personal. Love letters from Julia, printed copies of their text messages, and photos from their hotel meetings that were even more explicit than the ones Doug had taken. But the real treasure was Greg's appointment calendar. Not the official one his secretary maintained, but his personal one where he kept track of his real activities. Every Tuesday for the past 6 months, Jay, Marriott. Every Friday, lunch with Jay. And next week, tell Linda everything, divorce papers ready. So Greg was planning to leave his wife. That was interesting. I took photos of everything with my phone, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. On my way out, I stopped by Julia's office. She was an HR manager, which meant she had access to everyone's personnel files, including Greg's. Her office was easier to break into than his, and what I found there was even more interesting. Julia had been falsifying Greg's expense reports, approving hotel charges and restaurant bills that were clearly personal. She'd been using her position to help cover up their affair. That was embezzlement. That was a felony. I photographed everything, then left the building. The security guard waved as I walked past. "Find what you were looking for." "Oh, yes," I said. I found exactly what I was looking for. The next day, I started making phone calls. First, I called Linda Palmer. "Mrs. Palmer? You don't know me, but I have some information about your husband that I think you should know." "Who is this?" "My name is Nick Foster. My wife works with your husband." There was a long pause. "What kind of information?" "The kind that's better discussed in person. Are you free for coffee this afternoon? We met at a Starbucks across town." Linda Palmer was an attractive woman in her early 40s, well-dressed and well-maintained in the way that wives of successful men often were. She looked nervous. "I'm not sure why I'm here," she said. I slid a manila envelope across the table. "Because you deserve to know the truth." She opened the envelope and looked at the first photograph. Her face went white. "Oh my God." "I'm sorry," I said. "I really am, but I thought you should know." She flipped through the photos, her hands shaking. "How long?" "At least 6 months, maybe longer." "That bastard." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Your wife?" "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "That depends on what you're going to do." We talked for an hour. By the time we were done, Linda Palmer was no longer crying. She was planning. "I want copies of everything," she said. "Already made. And I want to be there when you confront them." I was hoping you'd say that. That evening, Julia came home late again. Another client meeting. "How was your day?" she asked, same as always. "Productive," I said. "Very productive." She looked at me strangely, like she was trying to figure out if there was a hidden meaning in my words. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just looking forward to Emily's wedding." "Really? I thought you hated family gatherings." "This one's going to be different." "Different how?" I smiled. "You'll see." Emily's wedding was everything Margaret Harrington had dreamed of. The ceremony was held at the most exclusive country club in town, with 300 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. I arrived alone. Julia had gone early to help with last-minute preparations, which gave me time to set everything up. I'd rented a projector and a screen, telling the wedding coordinator that Emily had requested a slideshow of family photos during the reception. I'd also hired a videographer, officially to record the speeches, but really to capture what was about to happen. Linda Palmer was there with her kids, playing the role of the supportive wife. She looked beautiful and composed, giving no hint of what she knew or what was coming. Doug was there too, disguised as a waiter. He had cameras positioned around the room and a direct line to the local news stations. What was about to happen was going to be very public. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Emily looked radiant, Carter looked nervous but happy, and Margaret looked like she was presiding over a royal wedding. Julia stood at the altar as maid of honor, beautiful in her blue dress, smiling and playing her part perfectly. Greg sat in the third row with his family, looking distinguished and respectable. They had no idea what was coming. The reception started at 6. Cocktails, dinner, speeches from the father of the bride and the best man. Everything was going according to plan. Then it was time for the slideshow. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, taking the microphone from the DJ, "before we continue with the evening's festivities, I'd like to share some special photos with you." Margaret looked pleased. Emily clapped her hands together. Julia smiled at me from the head table. The lights dimmed, and the first image appeared on the screen. It was a wedding photo of Julia and me from 8 years ago. We looked young and happy and in love. Marriage is a beautiful thing, I said into the microphone. It's built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. The next photo was of Julia and me at last year's Christmas party, smiling and holding hands. But sometimes, I continued, people forget what marriage means. The next photo was of Julia and Greg entering the Marriott Hotel. The room went very quiet. Sometimes, I said, people think they can break their vows and get away with it. The next photo was of Julia and Greg kissing in the hotel bar. Someone gasped. I heard Margaret's voice. Turn that off? Sometimes, I said, people think they're smarter than everyone else. The next photo was of Julia and Greg in bed together. The room erupted. People were shouting, standing up, pointing at the screen. Linda Palmer was on her feet, staring at her husband with murder in her eyes. Julia was frozen at the head table, her face white as her wedding dress had been 8 years ago. But the truth always comes out, I said. The next slide wasn't a photo. It was a text message, blown up large enough for everyone to read. I can't wait to leave my wife. Then we can be together forever. I love you, Julia. Greg had bolted from his table and was heading for the exit, but Doug stepped into his path. Going somewhere? Doug asked. The next slide was the expense reports Julia had falsified, with her signature clearly visible. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I present to you my wife Julia Foster and her lover Greg Palmer. They've been having an affair for 6 months, using company funds to pay for their hotel rooms, and planning to destroy both of their marriages. Linda Palmer grabbed the microphone from me. Greg! She screamed across the room. You lying, cheating bastard! She threw her wine glass at him. It shattered against the wall, missing his head by inches. Margaret was trying to get to the projector, but Doug's associates blocked her path. Turn it off, she kept screaming. Turn it off. But I wasn't done. The next slide was a recording of Margaret's phone conversation with Greg, the one where they planned my humiliation at Emily's engagement party. Margaret's voice filled the room through the sound system. If we can make him look bad enough, maybe he'll leave on his own, Greg's voice. That would solve our problem. Margaret's voice, he's always been beneath Julia anyway. The room turned to stare at Margaret, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Emily was crying. Carter was holding her, looking confused and angry. Half the guests were on their phones, probably calling their friends to tell them about the drama. The final slide was simple text. The truth always comes out. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I set down the microphone and walked toward the exit. Julia caught up with me in the parking lot. Nick, wait! I turned around. She was crying, her makeup running down her face. I can explain, she said. Explain what? That you've been cheating on me for 6 months? That you helped your mother humiliate me? That you've been stealing from your company to pay for your affair? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You and Greg were going to ride off into the sunset while I sat at home wondering what I did wrong? I was going to tell you. When? After he divorced his wife? After you figured out how to make me look like the bad guy? She didn't answer. It doesn't matter, I said. It's over now. Where are you going to go? Away from here. Away from you. Away from all of this. Nick, please. We can work this out. I looked at her one last time. Even crying and desperate, she was still beautiful. I could see why Greg had fallen for her. No, I said. We can't. I got in my truck and drove away, leaving Julia standing in the parking lot in her ruined bridesmaid dress. Behind me, I could hear sirens approaching. Doug had called the police about the embezzlement, and reporters from 3 local news stations were pulling into the parking lot. By tomorrow morning, everyone in town would know what Julia Foster and Greg Palmer had done. My phone rang as I reached the highway. It was Doug. Where are you going? He asked. I don't know. Somewhere new. You did it, you know. You destroyed them both. Greg's wife is filing for divorce tomorrow, and Julia is going to be arrested for embezzlement. Margaret's reputation is ruined, and Emily's wedding is going to be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Good. Any regrets? I thought about it. No, they thought I was weak. They thought I was stupid. They thought they could treat me like garbage and get away with it. And now they know better. Now they know better. I drove through the night, heading west toward a new life. In the rearview mirror, the lights of my old town disappeared behind me. I never looked back.